Episode 14, Never Bridges Again. Damn, that name hits different now. Patrick, how do you feel about that one?
Bro, I'm not gonna lie. It's like really really sad. I mean, that really is never bridges again.
For real, they gave this name double meaning here.
Yeah, honestly, at least our bridges did it in an honorable way, going out in the right way. But
You
it's still,
sacrificed him for Katie.
yeah, it was one of those things where if we were going to go get a player like Kevin Durant, which we're going to talk about a lot in this episode, you got to give up talent, and you probably gave up one of the best two-way players in the NBA right now. So it's understandable. My favorite player is gone though, which is tough, but I think Kevin Durant, who's been one of my favorite non-Suns players for a
He
long
has.
time.
He has. You're not lying about that. You always like Katie. That's why when this kind of stuff first came out about the trade, like when he first requested the trade, you were like, yo, we need to get in on this. He actually said Suns as a destination. What? That is cool. But we'll get into that. I'm throwing you a little curveball. We're gonna we're gonna talk about the Hornets first because everyone's talking about the KD Suns thing, and you're a Suns fan, so at least you'll have like a little more insight and all that. But I just figured we would start with the Hornets because there's really not like that much to talk about, and we just haven't talked about them because I've been avoiding them like the plague because they've just it's just one of those years. It's a Bobcats year. But so we traded Mason Plumlee for Reggie Jackson in a second. We ended up waiving Reggie Jackson because he did not want to play for us. And we were like, yeah, we're just going to keep playing Teo Maladon stuff. And then we traded Jalen McDaniels for what, 2 second round picks. It was part of a 3-team deal. I feel like that Jalen McDaniels trade, we'll start with that one. I saw that we got our second back from Philly this year, so it's actually not like that bad of a deal, I think. Because Jalen McDaniels is really good, and he's started the year shooting really good from three, and he's competent on defense. He could cut really well, throw down some dunks. He gives some more length. But I mean, our second round pick, is going to be low 30s, so it'll be like a late first. We have been good at drafting in the second round. There are like a lot of good picks to be had in the second round these days. What do you think about that trade?
The Jalen McDaniels one, I'll speak on it for the Sixers side briefly because this obviously we're talking about the Hornets. I really like the deal for the Sixers. I think it's
For sure.
for 2 second round picks. I think it's a young switchable wing who's going to be able to help out PJ Tucker and House with some of those defensive duties. So I love it for the Sixers. I also don't think it's a bad trade for the Hornets either. Getting 2 second round picks for somebody who's going into free agency this offseason, and you already have to, re-sign PJ Washington. It was one of those things. I feel like the Hornets did this trade because they weren't going to be willing to pay McDaniels what he's going to command in restricted free agency. And so if that were the case, I think getting 2 second round picks at this stage of his contract is a pretty good deal.
And like I said, it's like one of our second round picks too, so it's going to be a good second round pick. And yeah, by the way, he was an unrestricted free agent, so they definitely weren't paying him, and it just makes it that much more puzzling as to, I guess it was just money saving after all, but the fact that we didn't take a wing with the 13th pick or 15th pick this past draft, like if you didn't want to commit to Jalen McDaniels, like how much more did you really want to see? So like you could have done this trade but shoot, I better not get carried away with that. What do you think of the Mason Plumlee trade?
I mean, the thing is, we've joked a lot, about Mason Plumlee and this and that. I was disappointed with the trade, not because of Plumlee getting traded away, but only getting a second round pick for him. My main reasoning is if you look at the main trade I'm kind of benchmarking it with is the Thomas Bryant trade. And the the Lakers got 3 second round picks out of that trade. So that's really my frustration. And, there was noise earlier in the week about Plumlee. The Hornets were asking for a first round pick for him to only settle for a 2028 second from the Clippers, who are, under Steve Ballmer. Obviously, there's a chance when Kawhi and PG are gone, that pick, they might be bad and it might end up being an early second round pick. But with Steve Ballmer, I would estimate they're pretty much going to be a contending team most of the time. I just thought they could have gotten a better asset for him. I do. Obviously, I think he should go because it opens up playing time for Richards and Mark Williams and even JT Thor, Kai Jones as well. But I was kind of disappointed to only get a second round pick, and then obviously Reggie Jackson, who's immediately getting bought out. So
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you, but again, like he's gonna be expiring this off season, and it's Mason Plumlee. So the best thing is he's gone. That's all that really matters. It's just addition by subtraction. Mark Williams has already been playing tonight. Nick Richards get more time. That's the good part about this trade. Steve Clifford could stop playing him, but he'll actually fit in well with the Clippers, though. As much as we hate on him, like you were saying, like he actually, like, if he just gets the 15-20 minutes and then his dribbling and theoretical passing actually kind of does fit with what they do, like having so many wings, they like need a little more of an outlet of offense, and he gives that. And just like with Nick Batum, another former Hornet, like he'll probably just do a lot better because he's reduced in a like actual role instead of being a starting center.
yeah, I would just say also, I don't even know why I'm mentioning this, just to piss you off probably, but don't be surprised if he comes back free agency next year.
What? No.
I mean, I know you think that, but I could honestly see that happening. Maybe not as a starter, depending on how Mark Williams and Richards do, but I could honestly see that. In terms of the fit with the Clippers, though, I like the move for the Clippers.
If that happened, I would stop being a Hornets fan. I swear I would, unless we had Wembanyama.
I think he said that the last time y'all gave him a contract, but I do like it for the Clippers. I think it gives them a little bit more flexibility too. And I don't think he may not even need to play 20 minutes a game. I think it's going to be one of those things where in certain matchups he'll be the true backup center, but the Clippers also sometimes like to go with wings all around the court with Marcus Morris and Batum kind of playing that 4 and 5 role. So not going to be a whole lot of asks from Plumlee from the Clippers, and I think that will help him in his role for sure. The only thing I would say is getting the ball to him like as at the rim as a lob threat. I'm not exactly sure who's doing that. I mean, I guess you could say Paul George, but LaMelo is obviously a much better distributor than anybody on that team right now. So, but
what's wrong with you? Freaking Plumlee back to the Hornets. I don't. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying. One more thing I want to say on us is, dude, if Danny Green gets bought out, I think we should go for him. We just, like, if I were in the front office, I would just start getting good locker room culture guys. And it even had me thinking earlier today, because, I did text you, like, a few weeks back, like, maybe Scoot would actually be the guy. As much as Wembanyama was incredible talent, maybe, like, we need that dog. As much as he's kind of a piece of shit, I was kind of thinking today, like, would it be that stupid to, like, overpay on a 2 or 3 year contract to, like, Draymond Green or something? Like installs a defensive culture. As annoying as he is, he's a veteran, a champion, and you just kind of need an annoying guy sometimes. Like, what do you think of that? Like, if we could get some sign and trade going or some shit this summer?
So I really actually like that idea. The only thing I'll say is I think you'd have to find somebody in that mold who isn't Draymond Green, because I don't think the Warriors are. It's up in the air. He has a player option for $27.5 million for the upcoming year, and then he's a free agent. I mean, I don't know what the stance of the Warriors is, but I feel like he's actually been pretty solid this year. And I mean, he's obviously very important to how they play, but I also feel at the offensive end, he's been a little bit better this year. He's been a lot more playable. And because of that, I think the Warriors are going to want to hold on to him. It's also one of those things. How do you do it with him and PJ if you decide to
Well, it'd
re-sign
probably have
PJ?
to be some kind of PJ and something for him in a sign and trade or something like that.
It's one of those things. You might look to find a veteran at a different position if that's possible. I'm not exactly sure who that might be. Ideally, I guess you could say maybe a center or somebody at the three. Get off of Hayward and get somebody at the three. I'm not exactly sure what names come to mind. Obviously, somebody like LeBron, but I mean, there's zero chance of that happening. Somebody in that role. I just can't really think of a name at the moment. But the idea is certainly a good idea because I feel like the team kind of been lacking like a vocal veteran for a while. I think Plumlee was somewhat vocal, but he's also, he's never won. He's never won anything, to be quite honest. I mean,
Plumlee.
So Hayward is not vocal. Terry is a veteran. Terry's a veteran, but he's
Terry's like the vocal guy,
Yeah, Terry's kind of a ball.
Well, actually, and I think that's part of the reason they kept Kelly is because, who knows if we end up re-signing him in the off season, but maybe they just like having him around. That's what I thought, because you could have dumped him, gotten something back, but maybe they just everyone likes him and stuff. As much as his play could sometimes be hazardous for the team, like I said, it's good to have those energy guys, and that's why the thoughts did seduce me of what if we had a Draymond and a Danny Green on the bench, and then you do have the fiery guys and Kelly and Terry. I feel like that's what it's gonna take, But all right, that's enough Hornets. This is funny how much time we gave the Hornets instead of the KD trade. But so KD got traded. Everyone knows this by now. Everyone's talked about it to death, but we have a little special spot in the podcast for Suns, obviously. I guess, do you just want to tell me where were you? When did you find out? What was your reaction? Is this everything you could have ever dreamed of?
So I think the trade happened around 3 or 3:30 at Eastern time. So 2:30 my time, Central time. I woke up at 6 a.m. and I opened Twitter and I see Kevin Durant is trending. And I'm like, okay, scroll up to the top, and the first thing I see is the tweet from Shams saying that Kevin Durant's headed to the Phoenix Suns, and I'm like, oh shit, immediately I was just like, wow, because the noise had been coming out, a little bit day by day after the Kyrie trade, which we'll talk about in a future episode about the whole Kyrie situation, but I wasn't sure because the way the Nets kind of handled that trade, they were kind of trying to build a team around Kevin Durant. And reports have also come out now that they were actually trying to trade some pieces for Siakam to go with Durant, which would have been really interesting when you think about it. But I thought Kevin Durant was only going to be traded during the offseason, to be honest. I thought just contract-wise, I thought with the way Mikal Bridges has been playing recently, I thought he was probably still off of the table. And I just didn't see a reason they would take Ayton with Claxton already on that team. So it was a surprise. I knew if a KD trade happened, Cam Johnson would 100% be going the other way. So that was the piece I expected. I love Cam Johnson, but it's one of those things. He's a great role player, but we have Kevin Durant now. We don't necessarily need him. Jay Crowder was in the deal too. Good riddance, to be quite honest. I really did like what Jay brought us. His first 2 years there, he did bring the toughness and the dog mentality. But at the same time, I would argue he's not even better than Torrey Craig. Obviously, the intangibles help. He's more of a vocal leader, like I said, than Torrey Craig. But our offense with Cam Johnson on the floor this year was night and day. Jay Crowder's just somebody you don't have to guard.
I'm sorry, I was laughing at just the right-handed hook to Jay Crowder right there. Torrey Craig is better, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I'd honestly rather give his playing time to Ish Wainwright, somebody who's kind of more of a project,
Yeah.
who has been promising, or even Josh Okogie, who's a better defender. Jay Crowder he's still a 3-and-D guy, but defensively he just doesn't really offer you against the quick guys necessarily. It was just one of those things. He couldn't deal with Cam Johnson starting over him, so he basically requested a trade. So it's a shame for him because he could have been playing on a really good team right now. He could have been that fifth starter with Kevin Durant and Booker and CP3 and Ayton. So, but it did turn out okay for him. He's on the Milwaukee Bucks now, the hottest team in the East at the moment. So that'll be my segment on Jay Crowder. Thanks for the Valley Hoop. Thanks for the memories. A couple clutch shots in the playoffs, but the ending was kind of sour, which sucks for him. Mikhail is the one I'm obviously going to have a bit of a longer segment on. Absolutely incredible. Think about going back to draft night. He was drafted by the 76ers, his hometown team, and they traded him to the Phoenix Suns. That obviously is one of the toughest situations, but since day one, him and Booker, specifically the two of them, it just makes so much sense. They're fit together. He was the guy to immediately come in and do the dirty work at the defensive end. And that was his role for the first 3 seasons or so. Just do the defensive work, hit open threes. Eventually, he got a spot in the lineup, which coincided with the Chris Paul trade, him getting moved from the bench to the starting lineup after we got rid of Kelly Oubre. And that was when he started taking off. He still had his role at that point. That season, it was all basically Booker, then Paul, then Ayton. Bridges was still kind of an afterthought at the offensive end. And even last year, it was kind of one of those things. It's just been so nice to see this year his development at the offensive end, the development. And I mean, it's been one of those things. He's been forced into action. All the injuries we've had this year, he's been the only guy who's stayed healthy. It's crazy. There are I don't know the specific number of days, but it's been like 1,300 days since Mikal Bridges has not played in a Suns game.
Dang.
Which is, I mean, everybody knows about his Iron Man streak. He is the N.B.A.'s Iron Man. As of active players, I don't know if he'll ever catch AC Green because that record is just insane. But his availability is a big thing in the league, and he's always been available. He's played through injuries a couple of times. But, it's like I said, just talking about this year, he's taken such a big step at the offensive end. He became one of those things where at times he looked like a mini Booker. His shot was criticized heavily the first couple of seasons, even though it was still pretty effective. Now his shot, I mean, it looks more fluid. It's still, obviously, the motion is questionable. It's not traditional, let's say, but it still is very effective. He's become so deadly in the mid-range. The three is almost an afterthought, but he still hits them at a very good clip. I'm very happy for him, though, because I think the Nets is going to end up being a good landing spot for him. There's a lot of young players, and realistically, maybe you'd say Cam Thomas is the number one option. I'm not really ready to make that step yet after a couple of really good games. But Mikhail is either the number one or number two option offensively on that team, which is going to be really cool. It's just going to be awesome to see him and Cam, be able to do these roles that they've done the past, like this whole season consistently, because they're going to have to. There's not going to be a Booker or a Chris Paul to kind of take the pressure off of them. So, and I love the fact that they're together too. For those who don't know, they're basically called like the twins. They're brothers on and off the court. So I'm glad to see that they got stuck together. The last thing I'll say on Mikhail is there was an article from Woj, I think, basically saying that teams offered 4 first-round picks for Bridges after he got traded to the Nets. I mean, that just tells you what his value is. He's such a good player. I would love it if we were able to bring him back at some point in the future, but it sucks. It hurts, losing your favorite player from the team. But unfortunately, the trade is necessary, so...
Yeah, it was interesting watching, because I've been watching a lot of the Nets games in the past couple of games, seeing the guys they had just traded for Kyrie and KD. Like, first it was Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith and street clothes, and the other night I see Mikal and Cameron Johnson. It's just so funny, like, that Dallas Phoenix rivalry they had last year, and now they're all together on a team. And I like all those players so much. Like we talked about it earlier in the year, how much Bridges was progressing at like off the dribble mid-range shots and getting to the rim a lot more, and you saw that a lot. We've talked about in other podcasts, like him finding cutters and just being a more willing passer. Yeah, I'm really excited to see him expand his game in Brooklyn. We'll talk more about them in the second part of this podcast, but yeah, it is sad to see him go. We kind of talked about it, like at first I thought like y'all did pretty good, which y'all still did. I mean, you got Kevin Durant, those picks are a lot to give up, but it like as much as we love McHale and Cam because they're so good, it's like, well, them and like 4 picks for KD is like pretty good value when you see some of the other trades going on around the league, but I still wouldn't be mad if I'm the Nets. Then so another trade y'all ended up making was Dario Saric for Darius Bazley. I like this move. As much as we both like Saric, like I definitely get them wanting to have another guy who play 10, 15 minutes and that to give Torrey Craig a rest, like move his feet a little better than Saric. I've like never really bought him as too good of a player. Like he's improved as a shooter for sure, but on really low volume. But I mean, I feel like it's a good little plug in the holes of the ship after trading all that depth. Then y'all got TJ Warren too, who's like another super good wing. That excites me. Like we've talked about a bit, like how do you feel about just the whole rotation at this point? Because y'all aren't like that deep. It would still be nice to have like another backup guard or wing, but I don't know. What do you think all around?
Yeah, I'll touch on a few things. I'll kind of start with I don't want to say the least important, but the Bazley deal was obviously a minor deal. The main part of it, I think, is that by trading Saric for him, we save a lot of money luxury tax wise. Saric was on about 8 to 9 million a year, while Bazley is on, I think it's 2 or 2.5 or 3, something about that. Bazley will be a restricted free agent this offseason, but the defensive flexibility, it's another body. The one thing I will say is I do like, he's kind of a bigger body, if that makes sense. Ish, Wainwright, Torrey Craig, Okogie, they're all more a little bit shorter. Bazley is a legitimate 6'9".
Well, that's the thing with Bazley. As much as I like don't love his game, like that side, he gives y'all a unique body type that y'all need, especially losing those wings you did.
Yeah, it was just one of those things that was lacking. One of the other things I will say about that deal is it kind of was, I guess, kept quiet because the first time I had heard of it was yesterday, but apparently Dario kind of silently was kind of wanting out. He kind of wanted to have an expanded role because he had some nights with us where he went off and he played well, but just this season, it's kind of one of those things where he's not really getting the minutes at the 5 when Ayton and Landale are both playing, and even sometimes Biyombo. And then at the 4, obviously with Kevin Durant now, and also Torrey Craig, and then Okogie or Wainwright, it's just not going to really happen for him. He's just going to have limited minutes. So Dario is somebody sad to say goodbye to.
He's going to be awesome on the Thunder, by the way. Just had to throw that out there.
I really do love the fit. Yeah, I feel like it's almost like the Suns. People forget about it, but he was such a huge player for us. And the year before Chris Paul came, for Devin Booker's development with Ricky Rubio running the point, I really like that. I almost, in a way, it's kind of a weird comparison, I know, but Giddey and Shea is almost like, like a Rubio Booker, just kind of in that mold. And I think Saric will help open up so many possibilities for them on the floor. And he's looked a lot better. He's more athletic than he did the past several months or so.
Did you say he was expiring?
What's that?
Did you say he was expiring? Or does he have one more? Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's
I wonder if they
expiring.
sign him.
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility.
Like him and Chet could be fun.
Would be interesting. You could also maybe see him go back to the Sixers if he liked it there. I don't know on that specifically, but he could be like the small ball 5 backup for Embiid, or maybe the Nuggets like him as like the mini Jokic, or the Kings mini Sabonis. Yeah, there's so many possibilities for him. He's a long way from being out of the league. I'll say that he'll have a role with several teams. But touching on the next one, T.J. Warren, it's one of
Ooh.
those things where I was happy to get him in this trade. Just because, we gave up 3 wings. Obviously, Crowder didn't really play much for us, but we need wings, first of all. And one of the things we need is bench scoring. And, I'm not going to say that TJ Warren has been particularly amazing this year. And obviously, he's barely played the last 3 seasons. But, I mean, I watched him in Tuesday's game before all the trades, and he looked pretty good against us. He's obviously more of a mid-range guy than a three-point shooter, although he did have some pretty good three-point shooting years, his last one with us, and then his first season in Indiana. If he can stay healthy, which is obviously a big if, he could be a very good bench scorer for us, somebody that we kind of lacked. Is he Jordan Clarkson, per se, with the shot creation and stuff? No. But he offers scoring at the forward position, which is, something we need off the bench. So it's a nice little addition to the trade. I was surprised, but I guess, for the Nets, they have so many wings already, they don't really need him. So
It's like how Drummond got thrown into that Harden trade last year. It's getting just a little more value on top of the star. Like you said, his bench scoring, man. That I do like, because people do think y'all are like really shallow, but me and like y'all's bench pieces are a lot better than people think just because the names are recognizable. But like Jacques Landale, TJ Warren, Damian Lee, Cameron Payne, and insert someone else, like I like that as a bench unit, because TJ Warren, like you said, he's more of a mid-range get to the rim guy, but yet y'all are already one of the best mid-range teams. He fits right in. He could fill in for some of the shots that Katie or Booker would have gotten you. So but yeah, I really like that piece.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a spot. We have 2 open roster spots right now. I think one of them, Ish Wainwright's going to get converted from his 2-way deal to a full contract. The other one will be a buyout candidate, I would imagine, which I'll talk about in a second. But I do want to give Kevin Durant his flowers here for a little bit. I feel like we kind of been talking more about the negatives of losing Mikal than obviously getting Kevin Durant. The offense is going to be close to unstoppable if it's played right.
For real. Oh my God.
I mean, just the actions between Booker and Durant is going to be crazy because, Booker has become really, really good in a quiet way of becoming an off-ball screener, and having situations now where you can have a Booker, Kevin Durant pick and roll or pick and pop is literally scary. And the thing is you're going to have team's best defender now guarding Kevin Durant, which means your second best defender is now going to be guarding Booker, which is scary enough. I mean, I'm picturing like a hypothetical matchup against the Bucks, for example. You look at Drew Holiday gave Booker a lot of troubles in that finals, although Booker still got some pretty damn good games. I mean, I'm just looking at a hypothetical matchup with that, and it's like, you could put Drew Holiday on Kevin Durant, then you got Middleton, I guess, on Booker, and then you're looking at Grayson Allen or Pat Connaughton on Chris Paul. And it's like, Chris Paul is going to do so much better. Even if you look at the West matchups, for example, now you have a situation where Kawhi and PG are both going to have to be called into action against Durant and Booker, leaving Chris Paul with Terrence Mann, Terrence Mann's a good defender, don't get me wrong, but it's just going to open up a world of possibilities. And the person who really is going to benefit from this, I hope, is DeAndre Ayton. I mean, obviously his shots are probably going to decrease, but he should be getting such good looks at such a high level of efficiency. I mean, the amount of pressure that having Kevin Durant, Chris Paul, and Booker on the perimeter is going to do is going to make it scary. So I just can't wait. I can't wait to watch.
About
see how that offense is going to look.
It took like a second for that to register when I saw the trade. It took because I was thinking about all the other stuff, and like 2 minutes later, I'm like, wait, they still have DeAndre Ayton. And it really excited me because me and you are probably the biggest DeAndre Ayton defenders, but it's just I know he's been more of an afterthought this season, not been playing that great. He's been playing a lot better recently. He had a big game last week. But just like him and Kevin Durant as a front court, it's so exciting. Like how big those guys are, how like versatile they both are on defense, and like yeah, I don't even know, man. It's just the fact that y'all have KD, Ayton, and Torrey Craig as your front court, because Torrey Craig's been really good, especially like offensive rebounding, underrated there. But yeah, it's super exciting. One thing I did want to talk about before we get more into like your thoughts on like what the playoffs are going to look like this year and years after. I did like want to go into the ramifications of this type of trade a little bit, like looking outside of the basketball part of things, because like I'm pretty sure everyone's unanimously like, yeah, you would do this trade any day. I've heard some conversations like in the podcast sphere where it's like, well, they gave up all these unprotected first round picks. That's like one of these teams going to look in the past and go like, oh, we're going to regret that. I don't know. It's worth the risk every time. You just give up, like, obviously losing Bridges hurts, but giving up all that to get KD, like, I don't know. Like, immediately, one benefit of it is you get all these free agents that you wouldn't have otherwise, buyout market, and then the off season. And look how y'all even got to the point where KD wanted to go there. Like just having KD for the next few years, putting together playoff runs. Not only does it like make Devin Booker more happy to be like a lifelong Sun, but like the rep of the Suns in the league is going to continue to grow. Y'all are going to get so many more fans. And like younger generations are going to see KD and Devin Booker playing together, and like it'll become more of like a one of the franchises that are burned into people's heads. And maybe I'm overrating it. Like maybe a few years of KD won't do that, but Booker is already so popular, and if y'all can win a championship, more the merrier. What do you think about all that type of stuff?
It was one of those things. I saw the 4 first-round picks, and I was kind of like, okay. I mean, it was kind of one of those things that was expected, and with our drafting history, considering our last good draft picks were probably, I mean, I guess Cam Johnson could count too, but it's been a while. Our draft history isn't the best. I'm hoping our new owner, which we haven't really even talked about, but we have a new owner. Obviously now Sarver is gone, Matt Ishbia. Hopefully he'll fix that by bringing in some, better scouting people to help James Jones. It's clearly something where James Jones's strength is with free agency and trades and not in terms of drafting. So it's going to suck, obviously. You lose a bit of flexibility. It's also going to suck when the time comes to replace Chris Paul. You're not going to have as many assets in terms of pick-wise. Obviously, you can't trade your first-round pick every year due to the Stepien rule. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get a point guard to replace Chris Paul in the future. But Rudy Gobert got 4 first-round picks. I have no issues giving up 4 first-round picks for Kevin Durant if that's the market. I guess that there is also a pick swap involved in that as well. One of the years, I think it's 2028, for swapping first-round picks with the Nets. Those picks in the future may end up being good, but I mean, Devin Booker's only 26. I think as long as he's on this team, we're going to be in the competition. I mean, I think we're going to be either a playoff or a play-in team as long as Booker is on this roster, at least for the next, I would say, 7 to 8 years of his career until he gets to like that 34, 35 mark, unless something crazy happens. So, and Ayton as well. People forget Ayton's obviously on this roster. Is he a long-term player for us? I have my doubts on that.
Depends on what happens in the playoffs.
I also don't think as well that we're going to let him go for nothing. If it came down to it, I think we would stuff it out. We would trade him for another really good piece. So yeah, I think it's one of those things. Those picks will never be top 15 even. I think it would be, and they'll never be, I don't think, a top 5 pick without some lottery insanity. So the picks aren't a concern. I guess, the window, that's really the thing you talk about, is the window much shorter now, and I do tend to agree. Kevin Durant is 34 years old, which is crazy to believe, to be honest, because it seems like he was just not that long ago, 23, 24, 25, winning MVP on the OKC Thunder, but I still think KD is somebody who's going to age well enough. The injuries are obviously the concern with him. But the hope is that playing with young players like Booker and Ayton instead of, Irving's a bit of a veteran. James Harden was obviously a veteran. And then the Warriors team, which had played a lot of playoff games over that time. People underestimate how these deep playoff runs affect athletes' bodies and stuff. It's a lot more games they have to play. So, I'm hoping with him playing with young players, we'll give him the opportunity to rest more on and off the court, take some more games off and such. So I think it's kind of it's one of those things. Chris Paul, I think, will be back next year. So I think this year and next year, really the window for this team with CP3 still involved and Durant still in his prime. I still think this team could have a second window with Booker and maybe Ayton as that second piece. It just won't be with Mikal Bridges, unfortunately.
Let's not forget, even though he has gotten older and slowed down a bit, like Chris Paul did like go perfect from the field in the playoff game last year. Like this, I don't know. I guess that's a good segue to like what you think y'all's chances are in the playoffs, because y'all instantly did turn into my favorite. I was picking the Nuggets before the year, and I still think y'all would have a really good playoff battle. But I just don't know how you would guard KD, Chris Paul, and Devin Booker, especially with their defense. But yeah, what do you think of that? Like, how you think y'all could win it all this year?
So before I talk about that, because I think some of that's going to depend on what we do with that roster spot. Well, two roster spots technically, but like I said, I think it's only going to be one when Ish Wainwright's converted to a standard NBA contract. It's going to be interesting to see what we do with that. The buyout candidates that I've been looking at the most, Danny Green is certainly on that list. The question with Danny Green is, is he still a defensive good enough player? It's hard to say coming off of injuries, but sometimes guys come off of these, ACL injuries and they're actually a little bit in better shape, especially the older guys. I just don't know on Danny Green, but, he's not a bad depth piece to add. Justin Holiday is available. I'm looking mainly at guys to kind of play that three. That's really the spot in the lineup that we're kind of in question about. I like Torrey Craig, don't get me wrong. But it would be nice to have somebody a little bit better offensively and better defensively. But obviously, these players don't grow on trees. It's just one of those things matchup-wise. We're playing the Mavericks. I think Torrey Craig or Josh Okogie is going to be in that starting lineup to go up against Luka. But let's say we play on a different team, maybe somebody like the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, De'Aaron Fox is amazing. Don't get me wrong. But besides him, you're kind of looking at Sabonis as the next guy, which is obviously going to be Ayton's responsibility. So in that case, maybe you choose to have more offense, and that's when somebody like Justin Holiday might be possible. Or Will Barton has also been talked about, which would also be an interesting piece. He's not had a very good year. I mean, really, him and Holiday both haven't had amazing years. Those would be interesting guys. The last buyout guy I'm going to talk about is probably Reggie Jackson. There's a possibility of that. That would really be in a situation where Cam Payne's injury is worse than expected, and he may not be able to come back this season. I really don't know with Cam Payne because he's been out for about a month and a half to 2 months now. There's really just not been a whole lot of noise about it. So I think if the Suns have any worries about that, it may end up being a thing where Reggie Jackson signing makes sense. Obviously, he used to play with Kevin Durant, so I think it would be a good signing. And then there's the wild cards. There's two wild cards I want to talk about briefly in terms of buyout market. The first is Westbrook. I just don't think there's any reason to bring him in. I don't think there's any reason to bring him in. The idea is kind of like, you're kind of like, well, it could be, because he hasn't been that bad for the Lakers this year. But for our style of offense, I don't think it makes sense. The one that makes the most sense, I think, is probably the Clippers for him.
And him and KD don't freaking like each other.
I don't know how bad that is these days, but I just kind of don't see that. And the other one is Pat Bev. It's one of those things we need perimeter defenders. So Pat Bev makes sense in that mold, but his whole beef with Chris Paul and, he's had beef with Devin Booker.
He had beef with Westbrook and they got along. It'll be all right.
Yeah, I mean, I could see it happening. It would be a chaos scenario. But he's just said a lot of bad stuff about Chris Paul. I just don't see how CP3 would sign off on it,
Yeah.
even though CP3 is the ultimate, wants to win and such. I think Will Barton or Justin Holiday or Danny Green are probably the most likely use of that final spot. So playoff wise,
Justin Holiday
really,
or Reggie Jackson. Those would be my favorites for y'all to get, by the way.
yeah, I mean, Reggie Jackson, people forget, is a 7-foot wingspan. So it's one of those things he could play some 2 minutes
Yeah.
and slide a Kobe to the three or whatever. Reggie Jackson, Holiday, Barton, Danny Green. I'll throw Reggie in there as well. One of those four guys would excite me. John Wall is also there, but fuck John Wall. I don't really care about picking him up, to be quite honest. So I'd rather play Saban Lee at this point. So playoff stuff. I'm going to talk mainly about the West, just because I think once you get to the finals, it's probably Bucks, Celtics, Sixers. I think would be my prediction at this point. One of those three teams, and I don't really want to get into the matchup of that yet. But in the West, the Nuggets are obviously the cream of the crop right now. I really liked what they did getting Thomas Bryant. That was a pretty good deal for them. The only thing I will say is, and I've said this for a while, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it in a podcast, I like the way we match up against the Nuggets, and I think I like it even more now. The main reason for that is I feel like our perimeter defense is probably our weakness now. I feel like our interior defense, and also the fact that Ayton has played Jokic pretty well. Jokic has said himself, Ayton plays him better than pretty much any center in the league. That gives me some encouragement that he could limit Jokic. And then, Jamal Murray's obviously got a chance to go off, Michael Porter Jr., but there's injury concerns there too. I would be confident in a series against the Nuggets, depending on how we play. I think team continuity also matters, though, and that Nuggets team has been together for a while now, several seasons. So that's the thing. The Grizzlies are just kind of a mystery right now. If you asked me this a month ago, I'd say, oh, the Grizzlies definitely are up there with the Nuggets. Now it's just kind of there's a lot of off the court stuff going on. They didn't really improve at the deadline. I mean, Luke Kennard is fine, but I don't really.
I just think if KD's healthy, they don't stand a chance just because they're not like extraordinary. They're so good at everything all together. Well, like their specialty is transition, but it's like as good as Ja is, and he could drop 40 on your head. Like y'all just, and we love Bane too, but it's just Booker and KD is kind of on another stratosphere when it comes to getting you a bucket whenever you need it.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I look at the matchups as well, and it's like I'm trying to think of what they would do. It'd probably be Dylan Brooks on Booker and then Jaren on KD. Jaren's going to foul out of several games in that series if you do that matchup, just to be quite honest. So then you're looking at a situation, Dylan Brooks on KD and then Bane on Booker, which I like Bane as a defender. I don't think he's bad. But Booker is going to get his against Desmond Bane. I just don't see the perimeter defenders unless they, kind of go with like a Zaire at the 4 to go against KD and play Jaren at the 5. And then you're going to look at Ayton to get Jaren into foul trouble and stuff. It's one of those things. The Grizzlies, I just don't think they have the wings to do it. It's the same with the Mavericks. The only thing that scares me about the Mavericks is I don't think we have the guys to cover them either. If we were to play that series, I'd throw a Kogi out there, throw him on Kyrie and tell him to limit him, and then just let Luka get his. To be quite honest, I'd just say Luka can get whatever he wants, but nobody else is going to beat us. It's what we did in several games of that series last year, and then we went away from that, and that's when the series turned, when Finney-Smith and Dinwiddie and Brunson started getting hot. So I hope that's still the strategy for us. Obviously, Luka is incredible. The Mavericks are just scary at the offensive end, but defensively, Reggie Bullock, Josh Green, Maxi Kleber don't scare me at all. Not nearly as much as Dorian Finney-Smith. Then it's kind of the Clippers always kind of scare me because of those wings, but when you have Kevin Durant now, don't have as much of that fear. Torrey Craig has defended Paul George well in the past, which is also positive. So, and then the last team I'll talk about. Shout out to the Kings, by the way, but I'm not scared of the Kings this year. I like what they're building, but I think we would beat the Kings in a playoff series. The Warriors obviously is on this list. Gary Payton back is pretty cool. I mean, he would probably get some minutes on Booker. I just don't know. I also don't know, like I said, defensively. Their strategy in the past has been Clay on Booker and Wiggins on Chris Paul. I don't. You'd have to put Wiggins on Durant at this point, and then
I think y'all would destroy the Warriors. Y'all seem to match up with them pretty well, at least from what we've seen in the regular season the past couple of years.
Yeah, yeah. At least this year we've started. I think like last year we had a little bit of a fear factor still against the Warriors because of obviously their history and stuff. The concern is obviously who's going to guard Steph, but Steph. There's a lot of questions about him right now and his injury. Obviously, we hope he gets back and plays sooner rather than later. Really concerning injury for him. But it's one of those things, if Jordan Poole ever steps foot on the floor, we're just going to completely play him out of the game. Booker and Chris Paul and Durant will just take turns just picking on him. That's going to be the strategy, essentially, is now you have three guys who can handle and create their own shot, and then you have Ayton waiting in the paint to hopefully exploit mismatches. So it's just going to be scary to see that offense. It doesn't even really matter. I mean, obviously, you don't want to play 4 against 5 with like a Kogi maybe, but if he can just sit in the corner and hit 37% of his threes, we just need somebody who can do that and play defense. And honestly, it doesn't really matter who that guy is.
Here's a question. Could y'all beat the Kings if KD was injured and Sabonis was injured? Or well, y'all could, but I'm saying could they beat y'all is what I meant to say.
Could they beat us if we didn't have KD and they didn't have Sabonis?
Yeah, just to throw theoretic, because just like part of, as much as I was defending y'all's depth, like the one thing we didn't talk about as much, like we did say it, but just the injury risk is pretty high with y'all, and it seems like if one guy goes out, I'm a little more scared than I am with other teams. Injuries are always a factor every year, but yeah, what do you think about that? Like if Sabonis was out and KD was out, just to make things fair, like I bet they could give y'all a series just because of the lack of depth.
Definitely. I think for the injuries, I think we could somewhat withstand an injury to Paul or Ayton. I agree with you if it's Booker or Durant. I think if Booker or Durant gets hurt, this whole team gets flipped on its head. But those two guys are the key now, because the two of them in a two-man game is just unbelievable. Obviously, Chris Paul is such a good facilitator, but if Payne is back, I think Payne could also do close to enough of a good job, or you play Booker and then Shamit or Lee or Kogi or somebody at the 2. So in that scenario, that would certainly be I would guess probably a 7-game series, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, all right. We gave that a good bit of time. We did want to get into some other trades and stuff, and we're just going to separate that into part 2, which I'm about to start.